I was just curious if I have to do it as the owner. Oh no, you got it.
I think it's on. Yeah.
Yeah, I see it.
Okay. So so when you deploy Ansible in Azure as the managed application, the application runs in your tenant, right? So I'll get into a little bit more details on that. The application itself is managed by Red Hat, right? So what that means is that we do the life cycle management of the platform, we do the upgrades, we take care of the application itself, and it runs in your tenant. So you just consume it, but we manage it and support it. So what does that look like? We have two options, right? So we have public access. So it doesn't mean anybody in the world can access your Ansible, but it does mean that the front end login is on the internet, right? So you log in, you authenticate through the front end, and then all the bits are running in the background. So this is what most people don't want this, that I talk to anyway. Some people don't care, but most people say, well, we really want it to be within our networking, right? We have an express route. We want it to only be accessible from behind our firewall. So that gives us the private access version, which is to access the platform, you have to be in your environment, in your networking. And so you'll have to VPN into your corporate network and then access it through, whether it be an express route or whatever it is. So what it looks like is we deploy in your tenant, as I mentioned. You assign us some IP addresses, and sorry, hang on a second. There's somebody sending me messages, and I just need to. There we go. I'm easily distracted. So what it looks like is all the different platform components run in containers, and we basically deploy. Everything is deployed for you. So you go through, and I'll show you in a minute. You pick the thing, which deployment you want. We usually create a private offer, right, which is a way of getting a discounted price versus the list price on the public store. You go in, you select it, but an hour later, the platform is deployed in your tenant, and you can start using it and access it. Before I go to the next slide, does anybody have any questions about this architecture that I've mentioned? No? Okay. So again, you log in to your corporate network, you access the platform then is connected to your back end, and then when you're running playbooks, it's running against, again, it's going through your networking, so it's all private. So we have single sign-on, right? So the ability here for you to tie into Entra or whatever your back-end authentication is, right? So anybody controlling access to your automation controller can be integrated with whatever you're currently using for ID management. And then underneath, what's happening is we're provisioning Azure resources. So depending on how many managed nodes you have determines, kind of how big the platform needs to be. But generally, it's 3 workers. Each one is a D4 DSV5. And there's 500 gig of database on the back, right? So we will, from time to time, as the platform needs change, revise these, but these are what they are right now. And this might be interesting here. So again, this is just kind of like the shape and size of the different things. By default, it's a minimum of 3 nodes. It can auto scale up to 20 nodes. Again, if you're running lots of jobs, you have lots of capacity you need, it can auto scale up. Logs, analytics, etc. are consumed by our SREs, right? So if we need to, analyze a performance problem, whatever, we have access to those logs. There's a Postgres database on the back end. It's basically the Azure database service, right? So it's all handled for you. And then and then there's an application gateway on the front end to let you connect to it. So the deployment of it, basically, you go into the cloud marketplace, you select the particular platform, and here's a little note that you want this one on the right if you want in North America regions, and then one on the left for EMEA. Again, you'll get a private offer, and that's what you'll select. And then, like I said, there's some requirements. I can share these slides with you. Basically, you need to make sure your account has the ability to deploy. The required VMs, or sorry, worker nodes. Sometimes your quotas aren't high enough. I'm not sure if yours aren't, but there's some information here on how to increase them and what you need. And then I'm just going to skip through this. And then there's as you go through, you'll have to enable your Red Hat subscription, right? So there's two parts to this, right? There's the Microsoft infrastructure piece, and then there's the Ansible platform piece. And then once you deploy it, you'll actually have to go in and enable the product subscription from a Red Hat perspective, right? This gives you access to the platform, gives you your subscriptions, gives you access to the Red Hat portals for support, etc. And then I'm just going to skip by this because this is not interesting. So when you go to deploy it, right, it'll ask you some questions: what resource groups, what region do you want it deployed in, whether you want the public or the private architecture that I talked about. And then when you go through, it's important to note that you're creating a managed resource group, and then our SREs will have access to that resource group, right? And that's so that we can log in and we can manage the platform for you. And so you'll get this prompt in the deployer, and it basically says co-admin access permission, and it's basically you acknowledge and authorize that in addition to Microsoft, who obviously have access to everything in your tenant anyway, you're allowing Red Hat SREs to manage in this resource group these entities, right? So I'll pause again there. Any questions about that?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Again, there's all kinds of different information here on the deployment. In 10 minutes, you'll get access to the deployment engine URL. So basically what happens is when you kick this off, it provisions a bunch of Azure resources, and then it kicks off the installer from our side. That we call that the deployer, deployment engine. And then so you'll be able to keep track of the deployment through that URL. I'm going to skip through this. Again, I can give you the slides afterwards. The deployment engine, though, will basically give you kind of an up-to-date here's where I'm at, right? And the lion's share of it is mostly in deploying the AAP applications, the operator, the application, etc. And then when it's done, you'll get the access to log in, and then you'll basically log in with your Entra ID or whatever, and you'll have access to the controller and all of the bits. And that's it, right? From an installation perspective, now it's running, it's in your tenant, our SREs are managing it. We do updates on a fairly regular schedule. I can't remember, I think they're done at 2 a.m. Eastern time. I can't remember exactly when they're done, but they're usually non-impactful. And what happens here is if you were to deploy it today, I can't remember if it's deployed on 2.5 now today for new customers. If you were to deploy it, 6 months ago, we would automatically do the update for you for 2.5, but we will tell you there's a window. Okay, we're going to do the update. I think it's in January sometime. You need to do these prerequisites, and you do have the option of working with us, right? If it's like, hey, we can't update, whatever, you can open a ticket. We can work with you on that, right? But so basically, that's the short version of how the platform is deployed. And again, I'll just I'll pause and say, any questions about the deployment of the platform itself?
So it runs as a Kubernetes deployment, right? On the AKS.
Yeah, I was hoping you wouldn't notice that. No, I'm just kidding. So it is deployed on AKS, right? And the reason is because Microsoft made us do it. You can actually deploy this on OpenShift. You can deploy it in VMs. You can deploy it in containerized in VMs. Like, we have lots of different deployment options. But when you buy this managed service, it has to be deployed on AKS because that's just how Microsoft structured the requirements. So again, you don't have to worry about that because it's all handled under the hood, right? But from the perspective of how is it actually operating, yeah, it's containerized. It runs on top of AKS, which is Kubernetes.
And
So we don't need to worry about the upgrades to Kubernetes. It's all managed for you.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
And I assume there's some kind of a status page for all the deployment parts. Yeah.
Sorry, I thought that was in one of these here. Maybe not. When you deploy it, there's a status. I'm not sure post deployment if there's. I mean, there's obviously the Azure portal, which will tell you, what resources are deployed, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, no, sorry. Again, just a bunch of other slides with some Q&A stuff.
Patrick,
yeah.
It's Derek. Just a couple of things, because we are going through this with another customer right now in terms of deploying it. So I just put in the chat a quick video that basically goes over what Patrick's just described, and this deck. As he said, we can share that. But we also have a set of all this pre-work, the documentation and links that we'll send to the team ahead of time. And if we need to, once you've had a chance to review those documents, if we need to do a follow-up call to answer any questions before you move forward with the deployment, we can plan all that. Because I'm not sure that all of the detail is in this deck, but we will share it with you. I think there's 3 or 4 different links to documentation around pre-works, things you need to have set up, prerequisites that go into more detail than this deck. So we'll share those with you as well offline.
Sounds good. Thanks.
And there should be links to this at the end here.
Oh yeah, maybe there's a resource page at the end.
Yeah. Sorry, these are the other options for non-managed. There we go. So, oh, maybe the installation document isn't here.
Yeah,
Oh,
we'll make sure you have them in plenty of time. Quick question for maybe Ted and Andre. The WorksafeBC team is going to be deploying this on your own. Is there any Red Hat services or a partner involved in supporting this, or is it Andre and team here?
No,
be deploying?
we are capable of deploying this.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So just looking for the pre-work slides here. Did you have another document handy, Derek, or no?
Yeah, let me
This one's this one's not. I don't think it doesn't have the pre-work stuff.
just bear with me. I will pull it up.
I'm kind of curious
Anyway.
about if you could suggest anything, how we orchestrate building infrastructure with Terraform and then configuring, whatever we want to run with Ansible, sort of how we marry these ecosystems and have a smooth.
Patrick, you had that same question. So
Yeah. So that's a great question. Here. Give me a second. I'm just going to pull up. we have an answer to that question, so I'm sure you're not surprised by that.
No.
So I'm going to skip by a bunch of this. Sorry. So what we have on the Terraform side is we have a cloud.terraform collection, right? So the idea here is that we can actually, with that collection, read Terraform state files. We can get the plan output before we apply it. And so there's a bunch of integrations that we've been working on, and we're enhancing this kind of as we go forward as well.
Mhm.
So the idea here, and let me find the, this maybe isn't the right, no, this isn't what I was looking for. Where is it? Somewhere I have, hang on, give me a second. I think it's in my infrastructure slides. That's just on the Terraform collection, but I think I have some. No, maybe not. Hang on. I gotta find the right pictures. Give me a second.
No worries. Sorry if I derailed the conversation. You can always send it to me later if we're going.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question. The answer is that we can do this in different ways, right? So we can have Ansible call Terraform. We can have Terraform call Ansible. You know, the idea of yeah, and this actually maybe is a good page here, but it doesn't have, no, it doesn't have what I was looking for. The idea of Terraform is that you get kind of this immutable infrastructure, right? And for many people, that's actually an unachievable goal because they're not actually building immutable workloads. So, but there's actually a pretty good document on this here. And the idea here is that you can, sorry, where is the, no, this is not what I'm looking for. This is using Ansible to call Terraform. So there are, sorry, this is really bothering me now. Where is this slide deck? Okay, I have another place to look for this. Give me a second.
You see, Jason, that's a so common question. There is a slide deck just for that.
Here we go.
So I'm getting the impression that Terraform can call Ansible, Ansible can call Terraform. They have different purposes and they can work with each other.
Yeah.
So I guess what's the best practice?
I found the slide deck I was looking for. So Terraform and Ansible, right? So with Ansible, I can create and manage Terraform resources, right? I can orchestrate, you know, as you asked, right? I'm deploying with Terraform. How do I then do configuration, right? So the reason why it's well, how do you want to do it is because we have some people that do it, you know, where Ansible's the orchestrator and initiates the workflow. Some people do it where they do a TF apply and then they want Ansible to be called afterwards. And then we have other people that are like, oh yeah, we use Jenkins to build a CI and then we call Terraform and then we call Ansible. We've created this thing with duct tape and baling wire. We're like, okay, well, you do you, right? We have some recommendations, but there's a ton of flexibility, right? So this is what I was kind of highlighting, right? Is where do Terraform and Ansible overlap and where do they complement each other, right? So the idea here with Terraform is that it's 100% declarative, right? And sometimes you need to be imperative, right? Because sometimes you need to do things that are not simple to declare, right? So I have something that's outside of the Terraform environment. It doesn't manage it, whatever. I need to take some other steps, right? Maybe I need to open a ticket or do some sort of task. This is great for Ansible, right? On the Terraform side, it's stateful, right? Ansible is stateless. So Ansible will learn about state, but it will not remember state, whereas Terraform remembers state. And when you change things in reality and you don't tell Terraform about it, it gets a little bit cranky, right? So, so these are some differences in approach. So again, I mentioned that one of the things you can do is you can have Ansible be the orchestrator, and you can have Ansible create your TF files, right, based out of templates, and then you can have TF deploy the infrastructure, and then you can have Ansible come in after the deploy is done and configure things, manage the drift, etc. Right? So this is an approach that you can use. But you can put these arrows in different ways, and you can have different things calling. That's fine with us, right? So, you know, the idea of using, you know, we have a module or collection, cloud.terraform, and you can actually, you know, say, okay, we want to deploy a particular project or infrastructure, and we want to trigger that deploy from Ansible. Well, I can do that this way, right? And again, I could build the TF file out of a Jinja template, then call this, and I could totally automate all of the Terraform pieces if I wanted to. Or I can build the Terraform files by hand, or I can have them built by another tool and then call the TF from an Ansible playbook. So there's lots of different ways that we can do that. That was what I wanted to show you. We don't need to go through all the different you know, workflows here, but there's lots of different options. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's great. It looks like you have a lot of good slide decks. If you could share some of these afterwards, that would be great. Yeah,
for sure. So I'll send these over to Saad, and then he can PDF them and send them on.
Awesome.
Cool. Where were we? I've lost track.
So we just finished the deployment conversation. We can do that on our own. Between folks on this call, we have enough permissions to deploy. We'll take that to security and make sure all the dots are placed where they need to be, and we're good to go. What do we do next?
What's our initial use case? Configuring CMS, virtual machine?
Good segue. I have 2 pain points where we need some sort of help. First one is compliance. So we do have a lot of trouble on the security side or on you know, operational work where we have servers which we are not sure about if they are compliant with our initial standards or not. Like someone logged into machine, did something to it, and dropped the session. What does it mean? Like, is there any binary we didn't authorize and installed there? Is there any configuration change? Stuff like that. So there is a whole project spun up outside of our team for that, and they are looking for help. So that's first pain point. Second pain point is about CMS and others. So again, folks on this call spend too much effort working on pretty simple, obvious, and easily, from my point of view, easily automatable tasks, which we didn't automate for various reasons. And that is eating up precious time of this team. So we have some stable, more or less stable systems where we do some activities like, I don't know, archiving or patching or version upgrade or configuration changes. CMS would be a good example. And sometimes that causes, I don't know, 7 hours work overnight on call just to do a simple thing.
Yeah, so that you just covered a lot. So on the if we start at the beginning, right, you mentioned compliance, right? So the idea of using Ansible here, like, you know, maybe I want to do things like here, let me see if I have some visuals to go with some of this, right? So you know, I can write an Ansible playbook that asserts certain things, right? And there's an assert module, and I can basically run through and I can say, SE Linux needs to be enabled, right? And if it's not, then enable it. Or make sure that these firewall rules are set, or make sure that SSH logins by root is not allowed. All of these sorts of things are assertable. The question of, do I just go in and turn this stuff on, might be a question, right? Or do I just want to check, right? Do I just want to assess whether or not they're compliant? One of the things I like to talk about is there's a partner of ours called the MindPoint Group, and they create a set of Ansible playbooks that are called Ansible Lockdown. And I highly recommend you have a look at this. Now, sorry, this is in here. Let me go. This is dark style here. It doesn't lend itself well to dark mode. So they have a number of CIS, for example. So if you follow CIS or DISA, they have playbooks that can help you get started, right? So let's say you're a CIS and you want to make sure that a RHEL 8 or RHEL 9 system is remediated, right? They have a set of playbooks to remediate. They also have one for auditing, right? So I'm just going to look at this one here. So the idea here is that, oh, that's that's GOS. So let me use the CIS. This one will be Ansible playbooks. So the idea here is that you can get a lot of work for free. Well, for free. Look, the MindPoint Group creates these and maintains them, and they have services, and you can pay them to help you with this stuff. But they offer this stuff to the community for free. So you can go in and you can actually see, for example, under their tasks, they have multiple sections, right? So different sections of the CIS spec, and then you can enable and disable each one. So the nice thing about this is even if you don't use their work, you can learn a lot by just looking at what they're doing. So for example, if I look at this module that they've written here, this is for CIS section 1.1.1.1, and this is ensure the mounting of squashfs file systems is disabled. And all this does is it goes through and it modifies the mod probe file, make sure that this is set to bin true, and then this is basically they've basically put in these assertions for each one of these different controls, and you can actually go and learn a lot about how they've done it, and then you can copy and paste, or you can learn from this and then build your own. Now, one of the nice things about the way they've structured their playbooks is you can enable or disable any of these in a config file, and they have some great documentation on this as well about how to use this. Sorry, I'm going to go back. And they have a whole read the docs page on how to use these playbooks that they've written. And so if you want to, for example, use these, here's how you use it in a playbook. And then they talk about the different role variables, right? So for example, I can say, I want to just do level 1 server, or I want to do level 1 workstation, and then it will only run those tasks for that. So this is, I often point people to this because it's a really good way to kind of get started in understanding how to use Ansible for compliance. So I'll leave you this link in the chat here. And I see Derek has left a whole bunch of links in the chat too. So does that help? Do you have any questions about that?
Yeah, that's great stuff. We're more Windows shop, so 99% of our workload is Windows based, but I'm sure we can find something useful for us.
Sorry, no, I'm a Linux guy, so I always gravitate towards Linux, but they also have CIS for Windows, right? So if you want to do Win2K22, they've got the same CIS playbooks for Windows, right? So, and then if I go into the tasks for that, right, and I look at section 1, for example, instead of running a bunch of, Linux-based things, they basically run, community.windows win security policy. You make sure the password history size is equal to 24. So you can, again, if you want to start on Windows, they have them for Windows too. And I would argue that the Windows ones are more valuable than the Linux ones, because Windows tends to be trickier to figure out how to automate against, because it's spent most of its life being a clicky GUI thing. So, and if you're not aware, right, like underneath the hood, each of these, like this Win security policy module that you call, is actually a PowerShell module, right? So it's written in PowerShell underneath. You can call PowerShell if you've already got PowerShell stuff. We don't recommend you do that. If there's an Ansible native way, we recommend you use the Ansible native way. But if you need to use a PowerShell script, you can certainly do that.
So that I'm pretty new here to Ansible. What is that module library? What's the nomenclature for it, and who develops them? Is it all community driven?
Great question. Some of it is created by Red Hat, and we have what are called supported collections. So if I go, if I log in, this is the Red Hat portal, where I can get access to the Red Hat certified and supported collections, right? So if I go into the Ansible section here under Automation Hub, and I look at my collections, you'll see that there's a bunch of Windows related stuff here. I have Chocolatey, I have the Red Hat.Windows collection. And then so I can go in and I can see, for example, here's the Windows collection, and then I can look at the documentation and I can see all the different modules, right? So each one of these modules manages a thing, right? So the WinACL module manages Windows ACLs. The great thing about Ansible documentation is it tells you about all the different parameters and all the different things you can modify. Most importantly, though, you scroll down to the bottom, and that's where the examples are, right? The examples are far more useful than when you get started, right? So you can just go and, oh, this is how I would use this module in an Ansible playbook, right? And so again, if I wanted, Win service, for example, is often used to manage Windows services. How do I, make sure that a service is started, right? Well, there you go. That's how you run an Ansible task that makes sure a service is started. So
this example is spot on. We have one of the patching night cycle tasks where one member of this team goes is staying awake at 2 a.m. just to make sure that service is up and running after the patch.
Mm-hmm.
So stuff like that is really valuable for us.
Right. So the nice thing about this is, because this is declarative, right? If you run this playbook, and here we're talking about the spooler service, but whatever the service is, if you run this playbook and the spooler service is running, and you say that you want the state to be started, Ansible does nothing. It checks, yep, service was running, it was started, I skip on to the next task, I don't bother, right? If it's stopped, I'll start it, right? So this is where the declarative part comes in. The other thing, and you don't see this here, but if I go into the Win service documentation, and I scroll, where am I going here? Down to the bottom, you can see that when that task runs in my playbook, it also collects a bunch of data and it returns it back to Ansible. So for example, I'm going to learn whether or not the service, the spooler service, is able to be paused and unpaused, because it will return a can pause and continue attribute of true or false after that task runs. And I can also find out what services depend on that service and what ones are what's the services dependent by the service, right? So there's a whole bunch of data that's returned back that you can then use in the next task, right? So for example, you want to find out whether or not the service exists, and if it doesn't exist, in the next task you want to send an error log or whatever you want to do with that information. So not only do I, get to write declaratively, here's, make sure that our service has been restarted, for example. I can also get back information that I can then use later on in my playbook.
So under the hood, that's executing some PowerShell on the
Correct.
machine. There's no agent on that remote machine, right?
That is correct.
And the Win service is, so this is a collection. Win service is what, a module in the collection?
Absolutely. Yep.
And it's these collections come from Ansible. Is there like another repository, a community repository, or
there are
extra?
Yeah. So, let me see if this is in here somewhere. We're jumping around at different levels because I understand your familiarity with Ansible is kind of varied here. So, what I should probably do is kind of do a little bit of a 101 here on give me a second here.
Well, Patrick does that given the different levels. So I've shared a bunch of links regarding the managed application specifically and that documentation. Saad will wrap that up with Patrick's slides and share that. What we also have, I have a set of links related to different learning resources that I'll also share with Saad. So for those team members here that are very new to Ansible, you might want to take a look at something different than people are more advanced, more familiar. So the other thing I'll call out is this team here, your pre-sales team. Patrick and I support Ted and Saad. Patrick, obviously, as you can tell from this call, is a deep technical resource. And we're here to help. So as you start digging into all of this documentation and links before we actually get to the deployment, or you're going to be deploying Ansible, feel free to reach out with any questions you might have. It's a lot of information. We're here to help and make sure that you're successful through this journey and this deployment. So don't be shy. You have all of our emails and contact information. We're here to help.
Thanks, Derek.
Awesome.
So there's two-part answer to this question. First, there's the certified and supported content, right? So there's over 170 different, certified collections that are available, like the Ansible.Windows collection. Obviously, you'd probably prefer to use these to get started wherever you can, right? And the way that these are done is sometimes Red Hat writes them and we support them. And that's true of the Ansible.Windows collection. In other cases, the vendor themselves write them and support them. So that's true of, for example, the AWS collection or the Azure collection. Those are written by Amazon or Microsoft. We support them with a joint agreement between those companies. And what happens is that collection contains all of the things that you need to manage that type of resource, right? So for Azure, for example, if I go over here and I look at the Azure collection, you'll find, oops, I went back too far. You'll find that the Azure collection is massive, right? Because Azure's got a lot of moving pieces. So there's this AZ collection, AZ if you're American, and you can see there's 336 modules here, right? Every module is responsible for managing an aspect of Azure, right? So for example, if I want to manage, an Azure Resource Manager private DNS zone, there's a module for private DNS zone management, right? So of the 336 modules, those are all contributed to by Microsoft. And if you're curious, under the hood, right, they're using the same libraries that AZ CLI uses, right? So it's not like we're reinventing the wheel here. We're using the Microsoft native things underneath. We're building an Ansible layer on top so that you can write, a simple, straightforward Ansible task, right? Rather than a complex whatever, right? So for the ones that are built in, that have certified collections, those ones, those are partners we have and they're supported by Red Hat and the partner. Sometimes you need something that's not there. And so that's where the community modules come in. And there are like gazillions of community modules for all the things under the sun. So sometimes, like, I actually contribute to a couple of community modules myself, right? So anybody can participate, the beauty of open source. Lots of our enterprise customers prefer the certified ones, and they will sometimes bring in community modules when they need them, when they need to, right? And we have a whole way of building and managing the we call it an execution environment. The execution environment is where your playbook runs, and it's got all the dependencies that you need. So if you need, for example, I don't know, pick some collection, right? Like I have OpenSense or running in my home lab, right? Maybe I need the OpenSense community collection because there isn't a supported one. I can go and I can pull that into my execution environment, and then my playbooks can use it, right? So that's a little bit more of an advanced conversation, but I'm happy to we can do a follow-up on that.
Seeing all those things it can do with Azure, I guess the thing we're going to be starting to think about is whether we want Azure to be stateful or not stateful. I mean, a lot of those modules you showed there are things we would probably end up doing in Terraform, but
right.
When would people not want to do things with Terraform?
So I go back to the question of how much of your process how much of your IT is actually immutable. That's the question. So people tell me, oh, we're building immutable container images, or we're building immutable VMs, and we deploy them and then we destroy them and replace them, and we do it all through Terraform. And it just works, right? Because we're the Netflix model, and everything's ephemeral, right? 95+% of the customers I talk to say that that's what they do, and then when we dig into it, they're like, oh yeah, but every once in a while Bob has to log into one of those VMs and do some troubleshooting, or we need to go and check the Azure Resource Manager because somebody deployed a whole bunch of stuff that we don't even know what they deployed. And when you get into those workflows that are not ephemeral, they're not in that 100% in that immutable infrastructure model, that's when Terraform breaks down. So I have most of my customers live in this hybrid world. We deploy with Terraform, but we don't manage everything with Terraform, right? We augment Terraform with Ansible, because sometimes the immutable model just breaks down for us because it's hard, right? And so, if you're deploying infrastructure through Terraform, that's great. I have no, great, do that. If you are then managing it once it's deployed through anything other than Terraform, well, now you're not 100% in the Terraform model, and Ansible can help you out, right? So that's why we have this blend of how we work with Terraform. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Does that answer the question, or does that
does help?
more?
Like, we're pretty early on the Terraform journey, but we're discovering like F5 load balancers, for example, using F5 Cloud. We want to sometimes configure them temporarily to put up outage pages, and then sort of unconfigure them back to our normal operating mode. And running Terraform applies for that. I mean, we can do it. We're just trying to think. It seems a little kludgy.
Exactly.
The way we're trying to do this.
Right. Terraform does not do orchestration fantastically well, right? And again, it's very much a declarative model, right? We actually, and this is, this is a thing I talk to folks about a lot. Like I was in a meeting a few months ago, and we did a hackathon, a 2-day hackathon for a large bank, and they're like, we're moving lots of workloads to Azure. And that's a process, right? And we have Terraform, but we need to orchestrate the process. We need to open a ticket in ITSM. We then need to check to make sure that the system is ready to migrate, right? Everything's up, everything's running, everything's good. Then we need to make sure that the thing is taken out of service. So we have to talk to the load balancer, take that VM out of service. Then we need to actually do the migration. Then we need to change its IP. Then we need to update this orchestrated process of migrating a VM has to talk to multiple systems, and I have to do different states at different times in that workflow. Ansible excels at that, right? And so, we have, again, F5 is one of our partners. So, if I go in and I look at in the hub here, and I look for F5, you'll find out that I have, my F5 big IP modules, right? I also have, Next and whatever. So depending on what type, where you're at in your F5 deployment, a lot of folks are still using the big IP stuff. I can go in and you can see here, I have 53 modules, right? And I can go and I can, change all kinds of different things, right? So again, if I want to update, with a temporary web page or something, great, off you go, right? Use Ansible, do the update, have Ansible trigger the Terraform apply, go make the change, then have Ansible continue, change something else. I can't tell you don't use Terraform, because if you're moving down the immutable infrastructure model and that's working for you, then do that. I'm just saying my experience is it's really hard to build immutable infrastructure unless you're like Netflix. And even if you're Netflix, it's not easy, right? So yeah, sorry, I'm just looking at the time. I don't know if we have a ton of time. I feel like I'm all over the map here. I hope it's been useful. What would we like to do here?
Yeah, it was very useful. Sorry, please go ahead, Jason.
Oh, I was just going to ask any other topics you wanted to cover, or Alex, before we.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in my head buzzing around. I will make sure to read the docs, and then will not be asking simple questions, which docs cover.
Yeah, it is a little tricky sometimes to find a great place to start. I will leave you, there's obviously the links Derek has sent. I will leave you with, let me find the, we do have some hands-on labs, which I find are really handy. I'm not sure, is there a Windows one here? Yeah, here's a really good one. So I didn't even know that we had this one. I knew they were building it. So these are great because they're hands-on real labs and they're guided. So this one takes about 75 minutes. It's the Department of Defense Automated Compliance lab. And basically, they do it for Linux, for Windows, and networking. The way this works is this is actually running in a platform called Instruct. And what happens is when you hit this launch button, which I've just done, it spins up a bunch of containers in the background with Ansible controller in it and a couple of virtual Windows machines. And you can actually go through each step and try it hands-on. And so it's a guided workshop. So I highly recommend this. I'll put this link in the chat. And, there's a bunch of labs there, hands-on labs. Highly recommend you give them a try. And, if you want to follow up, if you have other questions or we need to do a deep dive on a topic, right, please reach out to us. Saad knows how to find me. Ted knows how to find me too. And so, yeah, just let us know and we can certainly do follow-ups.
I think a great idea for follow-up would be something Jason mentioned. So we have infrastructure as code project team, which Jason is leading, and there are a few more guys on that team who are not on this call. Maybe it's going to be good for us to have you guys talk to that team, extended team, and help us figure out where is that borderline, if there is a borderline, where to spend our effort to make it most effective from your customer's experience.
Yeah, I'm certainly happy to give my opinions.
He has a few, but always good.
I have a few, and some of them Ted actually likes, but
Absolutely. Okay, well, yeah, well, why don't we do that then? You guys, there's a lot of content to review here, so the WorkSafe team, why don't you guys, have a read through, have a look at that, at your own pace there. And then, reach back to myself and Sad, and we can set up another session, go on to any specific topic you might want to, look at. And then to Andrew's point, if there's other team members, to get introduced to and we can help there, then that's what we're here for and love to help. And the other thing I'll just throw out there too is, I know you guys are going to do this kind of on your own without consulting. There's also a lot of fantastic training that we provide. So self-paced training and all those kind of things that, official content that we have that can help a lot of folks get through things and just learn, So, because there's always these type of content with the hands-on labs and stuff. What I've always found over the years is, so you end up getting to know like lots of different things, but sometimes there's just these little holes of information where the training fills in, goes kind of across everything. So anyway, just keep it in mind. If there's any interest in that, Andrea, I can get you information costing, but just so you're aware.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have a very specific training program for Ansible for Windows. So it basically takes you from the very beginning to how to write an Ansible playbook, and it's all Windows focused. So it would probably be worthwhile as well.
Oh yeah, that would be lovely.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll send you some information on that so you've got it and kind of have a review of it. And we've got, just like with Patrick and Derek here, focused on Ansible, I've got a team focused on the training. So they'd be happy to kind of show you how it works and the details behind it and all of that good stuff too at any time. So that's great. Thanks, everybody, for the time here. I'll ask one, if there's any last questions, otherwise we'll wrap it up, and I'm sure we probably all have other meetings we got to jump on.
I do. Yeah, thanks for your time. I got a lot from this. So.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
That's great.
Thanks,
And
Patrick.
Jared, for the recording, then you'll get it shared out somewhere somehow.
Yeah, because you're the organizer, Ted, either you or I will get a notification when it's complete with the link to share. So it might pop into my email or it might pop into yours. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, sometimes I've got to make a YouTube version because only Red Hat employees have access to wherever it stores these things. So anyway, we'll get it all figured out.
Perfect.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Have a good one.